Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back down the rabbit hole. I'm Monty Hook and I'm your host. And today I'm joined in the studio in Bali by Chantelle Raven.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining me in the studio. Real pleasure to have you here. It's really wonderful to meet a lot of inspiring people in Bali, especially this year, 2020. Mm-hmm. It seems like my observation is there's just really good people left here. There's like a lot of riffraff have kind of disappeared out of Bali. And there's really good quality people doing really amazing high-level things in Bali. And you're no different from what I understand. So tell me, what are you known for?
Tantra.
Yes.
I'd say, I guess.
Tantra. So how did you first of all, for a numpty like me, explain Tantra? Because like for anybody who doesn't know, the depths of Tantra and how that is, it's not just about sex, it's about all of life. But for somebody who is uneducated, like me, they might think, Tantra is a sex thing, right? But it's not.
So the sex gets emphasized because it's the only spiritual tradition that brings sexuality into practices, spiritual practice.
Right.
But yeah, it's about every facet of the human experience.
Yep.
And it's really... So if you can imagine that every spiritual path you've been exposed to, Tantra includes all of that. So meditation, personal development, creating the life of your dreams, being able to feel and witness your emotions rather than going into impulsive, compulsive behavior and addictions. But then it also says, hey, so we can connect to source through meditation and through all of these things of remembering who we are. And we can also connect to source or spirit or God, whatever you want to call it, through relationships and through sexuality.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful component of Tantra. And I feel like a lot of spiritual traditions, the practices have been developed by men for the masculine. And Tantra takes a much more feminine approach where we're going, okay, so living in the world with your family, having relationships, having sex, enjoying the juiciness of life, exploring sensuality in the senses, is that too a path to God, a path to awakening? Abso-fucking-lutely.
Oh, that's nice. Very cool. So how did you discover this? Have you always been doing Tantra?
No, so I grew up with a very esoteric father. He was somewhat of a personal development coach and EFT practitioner, emotional freedom
Very
technique.
lucky to have that in your life.
Very lucky.
Yeah.
He had his own building company. So he had his feet in both worlds.
Yep.
Like he was multimillionaire, doing very well in the business world. And then spirituality was always fueling that and he was bringing that in. Yeah. And then later in life, he kind of left a lot of that behind and just started practicing EFT. I was meditating from an early age. I was exposed to a lot of amazing teachers. Like, on the way to school, we'd be listening to Wayne Dyer and Marianne Williamson and Deepak Chopra, and he would always encourage me to read books that really expanded my mind. I knew all of the theories around what we think we create and that we're not our mind, we're not our body. And yet there was this kind of pervasive anxiety that followed me around all of my life. And I would often most feel it before I went to sleep or when I woke up first thing in the morning. And I felt like, why do I still have this? And I would really judge myself for it.
Because you have been exposed to so much work and personal development, it's like you shouldn't have that.
Yeah, and I'd do my affirmations and I'd meditate and I'd read more books and, listen to the audios that Dad would give me. And then as I got older, I spent 7 years at uni. I did a law degree and then honours in philosophy and then became a Rudolf Steiner teacher. But then I had 2 kids, so kind of left all of that and focused on bringing up my kids and created a business called Harmonious Mother, Harmonious Baby, which included coaching parents. And I was also working in sales and training sales teams and bringing personnel development into that. So I kind of started feeling like a bit of a fraud. Like everyone would come to me for advice from an early age.
But you probably had that vein of like personal development and that sensuality weaving through your work. But you
Personal development, yes. Sensuality, I would say no.
Oh, okay.
Like sexy, yes, from that space of I knew how to put the sexy mask on and performance mask on. But the feminine was unfamiliar to me. And what brought me to Tantra was that when I was 31, I was diagnosed with cervical cancer. And I know all about quantum healing and, that if we have dis-ease in the body, it's because there's dis-ease energetically and emotionally. So I'm like, all right, something's not working that I'm doing, something's off. And I just really opened up to maybe there's something that I'm missing here. And, I had
Did you not have any insights at that time that it was around that femininity?
No.
You didn't understand the depths of that at that time?
No, I didn't. I hadn't been exposed to teachings around masculine and feminine until Tantra.
Right. And is that because the worlds that you were living in were high performance kind of environments and
I mean, motherhood certainly brought me more into my feminine, but nowhere near like Tantra, because I didn't know how to feel my emotional body. I only knew how to witness it. Right. I didn't know actually how to ask for what I need or vibrate my anger so that I could find healthy boundaries or, utilize sexual energy to release trauma out of my body. I didn't know any of that. So I'm like, okay, if there's something else, show me. And, I'm good at praying, if you want to call it praying. And I went to pick up my daughter from school. She went to an alternative school, Rudolf Steiner School. And one of my friends noticed that my energy was a bit off and said, are you okay? And I told her about the cancer. And she said, my ex is in town who's a shaman. And he heals cancer using shamanic energetics.
Yeah.
I'm like,
just energy, not plant medicine or anything?
No, just energy and body work. Yep. So I'm like, okay, may as well meet him.
And you hadn't done anything like that before?
No, I mean,
you knew about it.
Now I understand that the basic principle of shamanism is where attention goes, energy flows. So that was a familiar concept to me. But I didn't know about how energy in the body moves and shifts, and that your shamanic infrastructure moves and shifts depending on how empowered you are sexually and emotionally to really vibrate energy through the body. But I was about to find out. So our first session went for 5 hours. He was pulling birds out of my shoulders and taking me into all sorts of dimensions and into pain that I had never felt before, and basically diagnosed me with anger. Yep. He was like, you have a lot of anger. And I'm like, I don't feel angry. And he's like, what about this or this? And I was very love and light back then. So I was like, I forgive that person and this person. And just kind of bypassing all of that.
But that's just a subtle suppression of what was really lurking.
It was a huge suppression.
Right.
So, I grew up with a very angry mother, and I associated anger with projection and manipulation and shaming and blaming. So I'm like, you don't do that. I pedestaled my father, who was kind of Buddha, Christ incarnate. I've seen him in 43 years maybe get angry 3 times. He's very
grounded.
Very zen. And he has a strong witness. But, I've seen in him how not feeling his emotional body and not being connected to his needs has actually created a lot of dysfunction in his life. But I couldn't see that then. I was just modeling myself on him. So, as sessions progressed, I realized I am fucking angry. I remember one session, he was telling me I was angry, and I was saying, no, he's like, just try growling. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, I'm not going to growl. I was being very arrogant. But he kept poking me, and I was like, you're making me angry. And then he kept poking, and then I just let out such a scream. So I found my anger. I actually ended up pushing him to the other side of the room, and I'm like, there's probably some anger in there. There was a lot.
Good to get it out.
Good to get it out.
Where does the name Chantelle Raven come from? I assume there's a story with Raven. That's not your birth name,
Yeah, so Chantelle's my birth name.
Yeah.
So Raven came, it would have been 8 years ago. I only took it on, I think, 2 years ago. I was in Sedona, which is a very, very potent land. Have you been to Sedona?
I haven't, but I know about all the vortexes there. And,
amazing.
It's on my top of my list,
So I was on the red rocks of Sedona in this beautiful magical vortex, and Rogelio Rodriguez, this amazing shaman, Native American Indian guy with long black hair, was like drumming and journeying me into this cave, you know, in my imagination, but we were near the cave. And yeah, when I went into the cave, I saw the trifecta, or the triple goddess. I saw the Black Madonna, Mother Mary, and Mary Magdalene. And there was like jewels everywhere, and then a raven came in and sat with me, and there was more to the vision than that. Now, I didn't know that this was a journey to find my name, but then when I came out of it, he said, "What did you see?" And then he said, "Your name is Raven," and there's another name which I don't.
But you only embraced it 2 years ago.
Yeah, because when I looked up what Raven meant and felt the resonance of that, I didn't feel like I held that, and I also didn't want to take that responsibility on. Like, the name Raven for me is really about the capacity to be able to be in the transpersonal in a lot that I do, and see much wider, which means less selfishness. And I wasn't quite ready for that, and also an authentic connection to mysticism that I have now that I didn't have then.
Yeah. So I mean, some people will be watching this and listening to this, going, "What are you wackos talking about?"
Right,
but
right.
I love this kind of stuff. So, and I mean, the thing that I am hearing from you in terms of the way you're describing Tantra is that it's an all-encompassing thing, right? It's not like just. I think the way that we view certain tools or things that we do in our life, we take it upon as almost a separate thing. It's like, okay, well, fitness is like, it's something that I do at this time of the day, and it's like a tool that I use, or sex or whatever. People kind of have these weird relationships rather than all these things just being weaved together as part of their life, right? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And the way that you're kind of describing Tantra is it is exactly that, but it's so go into a bit more of the source of Tantra, and like, what are the roots of it, and what is like the philosophy, I guess, of the intention behind Tantra.
So a lot of the ancient scriptures of Tantra, so Vigyambara Tantra is the main scripture that's 5,000 years old.
And where's that from?
India.
Yep.
And it's a collection of meditations, and it's a conversation between Shiva and Parvati. So they're two deities. So the tradition of Tantra is very connected to gods and goddesses. Yep. So we have these deities who are archetypes that we can access and that we can surrender to and devote ourselves to in order to receive their gifts. And deity worship is, so Lakshmi, for instance, who's huge here, or Ganesh, right? They're both deities. And if you gaze upon them and you give them offerings and you surrender to them, then it's believed that you receive their gifts. And the way that I practice deity worship is I'll spend 30 days with one deity and chant the mantra that goes with that deity, and really start to feel closer and closer to that god or goddess until I feel at one with that god or goddess and realize that they're a reflection of me and I have those same superpowers.
And this is what I was going to ask you, because I think where people's relationship with God or source or whatever it is that they believe in, they believe that to be separate to them. It's like people talk about the law of attraction. It's like, okay, well, they put power in the law, or they put power in the God, or whatever. But like the way you're describing is, these gods are just analogies for ourselves. They're just us wrapped up into myths or stories, but they're just us. So when we can embrace that they are us, or we can get to that point where we can kind of become one with them, well, that is the connection, right?
And you know, I can really see it on this land, how connected the women are, especially, but also the men to Lakshmi, who's the goddess of abundance and joy and beauty, and there's so much beauty here, you know, and joy, you know, the smiles. So I've done a lot of Lakshmi worship since I've been here, and it's so beautiful to feel how alive and potent she is in this land. So Vigyambara Tantra, it's over 100 meditations, really. And they're kind of set up like aphorisms, so they can be difficult to understand. But what a lot of people don't know is that the practices of Tantra, the authentic practices that come from this ancient scripture, are so multifaceted. So there's meditations that are similar to Vipassana, where it's just silence, stillness, and witnessing, bringing Shiva into relationship with Shakti, or awareness into relationship with the breath and life force energy, and just witnessing without judgment, and really holding that space for whatever's arising. And then some of the meditations are to do with the senses, and some of them are to do with energetics or connecting with nature or relationships or sex. So there's all of these different aspects, and it's unfortunate that so much of the neo-tantra out there is only emphasizing the sexuality component because sex sells.
Yeah.
And then it gets a bad name, or people are missing the point. Like all traditions, Tantra is rooted in meditation and asks the question, can you, when you're making love, make that love-making a meditation by being fully present, totally alive with your experience and sensation, so that everything is welcome in that lovemaking? So that if we're making love, Monty, and I'm feeling grief, I can cry. If I'm feeling intense pleasure, if I'm feeling deep love, and it's this journey where you're feeling me in all of these different ways, instead of this goal-oriented, agenda-based sex that we see in pornography, or this abstinence fucked up viewpoint where, we need to completely not have sex if we're going to be with God, even though sex is what connects us to the most godlike energy on the planet, a newborn child, and actually creates that.
So, sex to me is probably is one of the things, at least, that is the most kind of amplifying, or the most the most amplifying kind of sensation, I guess. And there's a lot of taboo around sex, and a lot of people, and I've dealt with my own insecurities, of course. It's really, really common for people just to have a lot of insecurities around sex, right? So it sounds to me like that is where the deepest kind of work can occur, because if you can do it in that realm, then that very easily just kind of expands, and you actually solve other things in your life that are kind of rooted in the same place, right?
Yeah, like eros, or sexual energy, leads to gnosis, Plato said. Gnosis is truth, because when love is that present, anything that's not love shows up to be healed. When you're actually merging with another being, even if you don't practice Tantra at all and you are just pounding and going for the ejaculatory sneeze, there's still a depth of intimacy that we don't usually feel in our ordinary life. So especially for women, it brings up a lot of trauma, it brings up abandonment, it brings up the longing to actually...
It heightens whatever's lurking beneath the surface.
Yeah. And
or that could be the pleasure or the pain or whatever's there, right?
Yeah, exactly. So without meditation, you can't practice tantric lovemaking. Because if you're not growing in your capacity regularly to be with sensation and experience, without running off with the mind's analysis about it, without going into the future or the past, then how are you supposed to be in a space of presence when you're making love? So I see meditation as first base, and then second base is really being able to engage in foreplay out of the bedroom, actually connect at the hearts, have real conversations, take the masks off. It's so ironic that literally we're all having to wear masks at the moment, because it's such a metaphor for the masks that we wear, right? So what's it like to sit before someone and engage in real intimacy? And Tantra has beautiful communication practices where we can get deeper, so that before making love, I'll just use you as an example again, like before we made love, imagine if we actually sat down and said, okay, what does this relationship actually mean? And get on the same page a little bit, because that causes so much shit when the woman's thinking, we're going to end up in a relationship, the man's just wanting a one-night stand. So just that conversation alone can take sex off the cards, which is a good thing, or it can put sex on the cards with more safety, which is also a good thing.
Yeah, and it takes it potentially takes the unhealthy lust out of the way as well, because that that can get in the way of, you know, what's really there. And
yeah, and lust is healthy as long as you don't abandon heart and consciousness with that. So, you know, what I find a lot is once people's eros gets activated, or, you know, they're desiring someone, they just get lost here and they're not staying connected to their hearts or their minds and values. So having conscious communication before lovemaking is such a game changer. So, you know, after we talk about, all right, what does this mean for both of us? Boundaries. What are your boundaries? What are your desires? What are your fears that are coming up? Do you have any STIs? You know, like, if you're going to get naked with someone and merge with them at the deepest space of merging that's possible in this human incarnation, like, get intimate outside of the bedroom first.
Yeah, that's very interesting. What was I going to ask you? What does what do you see as the symptoms that are kind of showing up in society, like especially this year in 2020, right? There's a lot of truths coming out. There's a lot of shit happening in the world. There's a lot of fear and people throwing stones, and there's all sorts of stuff going on. How much of that is related to what's the relationship between that as a symptom and what individuals, the individuals in humanity are dealing with inside themselves, and how does that relate to the kind of thing that we're talking about here? So what is the work for humanity to do in terms of Tantra, dealing with their own stuff, whatever, that is going to help move humanity in a better direction?
To get present with pleasure and pain instead of avoiding it, right? It's like people try to find solution to pain. It's like it's always going to be in the flow of life. It's the resistance to pain that creates suffering, you know, that old adage. And pleasure, it's the attachment to pleasure that creates suffering. And people don't know how to just actually be with pain and pleasure. And it's the level to which people can be with their pain is actually the level to which they can be with their pleasure. So the more that people are numbing themselves to pain. And
that's the world we live in now. We live in a world where we're numbed by media, we're numbed by pharmaceuticals, we're numbed by everything.
And the sad thing is that all of this numbing and the addiction to alcohol and drugs and social media and eating, emotional eating, is huge with my clients. Codependency, love addiction, sex addiction, all of that isn't the problem. The problem is actually what that was trying to solve. And the problem is always the same. It's the incapacity to be with sensation and experience, because we're not fucking taught that. There's nothing in the education system that teaches us how to feel.
Or sit still. Like, nobody ever taught me to sit. Nobody ever taught me to sit still and meditate and be with myself.
So we're just taught to be like robots, to receive all this information, which is why there's so much stimulation, and then to feed it back. So it's like we're cut off from there down. And well-meaning teachers and parents, I just keep reinforcing that from a very early age. It's like, you know, you think about it when children are throwing a tantrum, or they're getting angry, or they're crying, oh, don't worry, don't be sad, or go and throw a tantrum over there, or here, have a lolly, or have something to eat. And it starts really young. And it's like, what if when children were upset, we could just be present to that and loving?
Yeah. So what do we do as individuals? What is somebody like? I mean, I've done a lot of personal development, and I'm, you know, one of my things that I've come to peace with is that I'm going to be doing this forever. Like, this journey of peeling off layers goes on forever. And I think a lot of people are not comfortable, don't have a good relationship with that, because when you start out on this journey, you think there's a place to get to. Like, when I get to this, when I figured this out, well, then I'll be able to be like this, or I'll do like that, or I can have that relationship or whatever. But I found real peace with the idea that, no, that just keeps going. That just goes on forever. So then I don't have a relationship with fixing myself. Now I have a relationship with just wanting to be better and keep on healing, and it just never ends, right? So how can people get that healthy relationship with fixing themselves and help and healing themselves. And what's an easy access, not an easy access, but what's the first advice you give to people? If you only had 5 minutes with somebody, like what would you give them?
I would say awakening or healing is much closer than you think.
Yeah.
And we feel that it's far away because the mind is so involved, right? But if we can just take out the agenda to fix, if we can stop all trying and let ourselves fucking fall apart, right? Let ourselves cry, let ourselves feel, and actually be so present to the sensation and experience in your body, not just from a place of witnessing it. And, you have to grow your witness first, I feel. But not just from that place of witnessing it, but by actually breathing into the body and starting to release the cells from all of that trapped energy that it's accumulated from very early on. Because those cells that are tight and constricted and that are stopping the flow of life force energy or Kundalini energy or, feminine expansion and openness and vulnerability, they're holding on. And if we're just witnessing them, I don't believe, and I think, I was meditating all my life until I found Tantra, and, I had cancer. So what I've come to realize is that until those knots in the body or those cells that are holding on to our rage, our grief, our pleasure that we've also repressed, all of that can start to unravel and be given breath, sound, and movement, we can't actually experience true freedom. We're always going to be searching for it and trying to get it.
Yeah.
Also trying to get love. And love and freedom is what we all want. And with awakening comes love and freedom, not through someone, but experienced as a force that we are. And that's actually available to us when we can be lovingly present with what's arising without that agenda and just let it be there and let it vibrate. Sometimes you just need to fucking shake. Sometimes you need to imagine the person that's pissing you off in front of you beat the shit out of the pillow and scream no. I had a practice for a good 3 months of just hitting the pillow and saying everything that I wanted to say to my mother that I didn't have a chance to say to her when I was a little girl. I had another practice where once the memories came up of my sexual abuse, I just said no to my sexual abuser. And, actually my whole physiology began to change. I started looking different. I started feeling different. A lot of my gut issues started healing. I mean, I still have a bit of a struggle with that. And I know it's because there's still a part of me that wants to control my reality. My children are in Australia. I can't get home. And that part of me that hasn't come into full acceptance of that is showing up. And I know that whenever I'm experiencing something physical, any kind of dis-ease in the body, there is something underneath that, somewhere where I'm constricted. So I just want to say something about those knots in the body and releasing the tension. If we don't, it's like, just like the laws of attraction, where if you think that everyone's a prick, everyone's going to be a prick. Or if you think your dream man's coming, then, it's going to be more likely, right? It's like these knots in the body hold beliefs. So maybe there was a knot in my body that experienced a lot of emotional abuse, right? And that knot held the belief that women can't be trusted. Then that's going to get sent out there and I'm going to attract that so that I can feel that, right? Because the universe always has our back to bring greater integration and healing. Or, another knot. People always say, why do I attract the same kind of man? He's always an avoider. Or men say, why do I always attract psychos? There's a belief in there, right? You can witness it all you want until you actually go in and you feel that belief. Women are fucking crazy, or women are going to control me, or whatever it is, or men are going to abandon me. And you say, what's underneath that? What's underneath that? And you just... and you feel the pain of that, and you feel the tears, and you say what you couldn't say then. That knot is going to stay there.
Yeah, that's really powerful. What's your philosophy around? I'm really interested in this idea of, every physical ailment that we have, cancer, disease, a broken knee, all of it is all related to some emotional trauma.
I think it can go extreme and then people can be like, oh, I'm not spiritual if I'm sick. I think sometimes the body needs to purge and release, or, where we're going through a fever.
I'm not spiritual if I'm sick. I haven't heard that one before.
Oh yeah, like I've met
really?
people who are ashamed if they're sick because
okay.
that means they've manifested something. And
yeah.
you know, I think sometimes we need to have a fever.
But that in itself is the opposite of being spiritual, because you're not surrendering to any experience and you're just all wrapped up in your head. So
a lot of what spiritual people are thinking is spiritual is the opposite to being spiritual.
Yes.
The amount of judgment I see in the spiritual communities is actually ridiculous.
Yes.
You know, it's the same with religion. Yeah, okay, we're here to love and embody love, but let's fight anyone who doesn't agree with our principles. And something I do love, another thing I love about Tantra is that it's so inclusive of every tradition. You know, it synthesizes a lot of the other traditions. So, yeah, but I do believe that there's usually a sign or usually a message in what we manifest physically. So if I hurt myself and I can't get out of bed, it doesn't take rocket science to realize that I probably need to rest. And the only way that my body was going to get rest was to force it through sickness or falling over or whatever. And then, the deeper ailments, I believe, really show up because, you know, cells repeat themselves, right? So if you've got a cell or lots of cells in the body that have got very debilitating beliefs and they're multiplying, well, what's going to happen?
Yeah, and look, this is a hard concept for people to grasp and understand. It's like, no, I stubbed my toe, like I hit the ground, and you know, so it's a fascinating conversation. What's your teach me about Kundalini?
Okay, so Kundalini is something, first of all, that you really need to experience. It's like a mother's scream when she's contracting and expanding in labor. You know, it's that feeling that you get when you hold your baby for the first time. It's the shiver that you have when you're cold, and then the release you experience when you're around a fire. It's energy moving in a way that you're experiencing both the contraction and the expansion of this human incarnation at the same time. And it's beautiful, you know. So I guess put more, if I could explain it, it's like coiled energy at the base of the spine, and the more that we're moving and feeling the fluidity of our spine, the more that our Kundalini awakens. And there's lots of practices to open Kundalini, but to me it's Shakti. You know, once you're in touch with your feminine, you're feeling everything fully and you're allowing energy to move instead of just being stuck and like being, you know, everyone's walking around like this. If we can relax and allow and let go and let energy move, then Kundalini starts to show her face. Yeah. And she's that serpent energy that it's like permutations through the spine. And
then that's something of a doorway or a gateway to even greater power.
To oneness. I mean, if you, it's kind of when all of the chakras are aligned and spinning and activated, we come to the third eye and the pineal gland opens and then the crown opens, and we're going into the duality of the body with Kundalini practices to go beyond duality into that non-dual. So, but that, you know, people who say they've had a Kundalini awakening most of the time haven't had a Kundalini awakening. They're experiencing tension in the body to such a degree, or like a trauma has hit, or a strong ceremony where they're feeling like the resistance in their body and the blocks and the expansion at the same time, which is what I was explaining. And then that tremor happens. And Kundalini is active in those moments, but until our base chakra is spinning and active and we're feeling really safe and grounded in the world, our Kundalini can't awaken. Until our sexuality, we've released fear, guilt, and shame around it, and our sacral chakra is really spinning and we're allowing our emotions, we haven't awakened Kundalini. Until we've really accessed our power and we can look at our own shit and reflect on what people say about us and stop thinking that the person who's talking to us needs to go to the psychologist or the whole world, and actually realize that what the world is reflecting back to us is what we've created and is who we are, then we can't awaken. Same with the heart, same with the throat. You know, it's like we need to open all of these aspects of the human experience. And I just did a living Tantra retreat with my beloved, where, you know, we're really working with a different chakra each day. And so by the time we get to the heart and we're looking at communication practices, people can really see how communication can be a meditation where you're actually bringing presence and awareness to truly listening to the other person instead of just being right. You know, and the heart can open to a deeper compassion that's not floaty, but that's rooted in practices where we understand how to listen and reflect on what someone's saying, and also how to share what we need from a vulnerable space.
And that's where we get a lot of our wisdom for ourselves, just from giving the space for other people to, you know, express themselves. And
And I can't miss the throat, because I feel like the song is the most important part of Kundalini. It's like when the throat chakra is open and we're co-creating with God, and we can feel through our body and we can sing and feel our song, our individual song and the group song. That's the most beautiful Kundalini awakening. You know, that's where you just go into this spaciousness and just, you know, there's the singer and the listener, and the singer and the listener are one, and you feel that non-dual space. Hope I'm not tripping out too much.
No. I love it. You obviously have a huge passion for what you do, which is wonderful, because you're also a very good example of, you know, what's possible for people in terms of finding something that they really love and a path, and actually like fully embracing that and going, yeah, no, this is me. I'm going to explore this. And I think a lot of people have those feelings, but they don't follow it, you know. Yeah, so that's why I love talking to entrepreneurs who have really explored that, because we think at the start of, you know, our journeys, it's like we've got to, you know, I'm going to be a Tantra teacher, but then I've got to get this certification, I've got to do this, and then there's all this like, I've got to figure this stuff out, rather than just embracing the journey, going on the journey, see where it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, in my 20s, when I was much more in the business world, that's really served me. And I think we need both the masculine and the feminine. So I feel like for global realization to happen, and for this world to change from the state of affairs it's in to actually a more open state, where we're actually giving people the love that they need, and we're trusting each other, and we're allowing different opinions, and we're experiencing what freedom is actually means at an embodied level. Before that can happen, it's like we need both. We need the masculine structure and logic and reasoning and learning and, you know,
leadership
even corporate tools. And we need the feminine vision and creativity and flow. So at the moment, the world is dominated by masculine practices, both in the spiritual world and in the mainstream world. That's the conditioning. It's like, okay, the more you can sit in silence and sit like a pretzel and kill your body, the more spiritual you are, according to a lot of people. And, you know, the less that you're tempted by sensation and relationship and the lower chakras, the more spiritual you are. And it's horse shit. It's absolute horseshit. The most spiritual person that I will bow to and give the most respect to is the person that can hold their practice when they're making dinner for the kids and the kids are screaming, when they can communicate in those times when their wounds are really being challenged, when they're making love and they don't just give in to that urge to pound and ejaculate or get the clitoral orgasm.
And that's why the most spiritual people I know, you wouldn't know as being spiritual, because they're not out there going, hey, look at me, I'm, you know, wearing robes and I need you to see me as being spiritual.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a place for that, and I think the place for that is people who have renunciated the worldly desires. And, you know, like Ramana Maharshi, so many of his teachings are absolutely epic. And a lot of those gurus who wear the robes, you know, much gratitude to them. But we're needing a new wave on the planet, in the spiritual world and in the mainstream world, that says, let's take off our masks. Let's start feeling what's really here. Let's start getting honest with ourselves. Let's switch off from all of the stimulation. Let's stop being work addicts who are just trying to get somewhere all the time, and actually experience the most beautiful depths of the human incarnation, which is to, you know, watch a sunset with your beloved while your kids are, you know, playing, fighting, laughing, whatever they're doing. To me, that's it.
I agree. But how do we lose our way? Because I tend to think that I think that's maybe how people used to live, right?
Well, I
And-
mean, how people, it depends how far back you go. I mean, if you think about how we used to live, it was much more aligned with what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
You know, when men could actually hunt and gather.
Yes.
Now that energy goes into a lot of aggression,
Yeah.
right? And all of this distraction for men where they're not actually in their bodies and able to explore dominance in healthy ways, or that hunter-gatherer instinct in healthy ways.
And so, I mean, this kind of brings us to this idea of, masculine and feminine kind of energy. And, obviously there's been different things that happened through, especially in the last 50 years, which I think has kind of skewed how people understand themselves is masculine and feminine, and men don't know their place anymore because females are being too masculine, and so men don't know how to show up, and then it just becomes this vicious kind of cycle, right? So how do we solve that?
Yeah, so to answer your other question, which is where did we go wrong, I think the ridiculous amount of technology and materialism that the world is flooded in.
Yeah.
Right. And
just the
and
unhealthy capitalism level.
The easy access to everything, right? It's just made us lazy on every level. And like with that masculine feminine piece, it's really, so I feel like when men and women are relating to each other, for polarity to be maintained, for the world to tick along at its highest potential, then women need to be more in their feminine. So more in a space of love, devotion, surrender. And people sometimes get offended, women sometimes get offended when I say that. I'm like, that's the greatest power. Like love and devotion and surrender and trust and being able to drop into the body and experience. There's so much power in that. And then, there's that masculine side of meditation, for more the divine masculine. And that structure and logic and action orientation. So really within each of us, even though when we relate to the opposite sex in relationship, I think a woman should be more in her feminine and the man should be more in his masculine. Within ourselves, I think it should be about 50-50 as much as possible.
So how is that possible then how do you think it can be the case that we can all, I guess, coexist in that way where I'm all for, women having powerful careers and being world leaders and all of that. But at the same time, how can we embrace that, or how can we be good with that whilst there is a lack of feminine leadership and masculine leadership in the world? Can that exist?
And I think it's when we realize that, okay, so there is that polarity when it's a romantic relationship, but other than that, working with this 50-50 within ourselves so that neither the feminine nor the masculine are dominating, but within most people the masculine is dominating, right? Either it's the witness in spiritual traditions that's more revered, or in non-spiritual traditions it's the action, right? And how much money we have and the future planning and the structure. So if we can all go within ourselves, okay, is that dominating my life? I need more feminine. Or some people are more dominated by the feminine. Not many. I think Bali is a place where you see that more than anywhere else, more than I've ever seen it anywhere else, where there is more of that surrender and floatiness and vision, and it's beautiful, but that can be equally as dangerous if it's not balanced. Yep. So a practice that I talk to a lot of my students about and that I'm vigilant with is an inner dialogue between my masculine and feminine, and where he really listens to her. So she's saying how she's feeling about different things, what's bringing her joy, her visions, her intuition, and he's going, okay, so how can we make this happen? So they're working as a team, but my feminine is definitely the one leading.
So the answer to the greater collective is for each of us to do our own inner work and find that balance within ourselves, and then it will show up exactly how it needs to in our outer worlds. Yeah,
and I think community is a big piece to that, because it's fucking hard doing the inner work without people. Like, I'm living with 6 people at the moment. I've got a huge community back home in Australia. The community is getting really big here. And we need support. We need to be around people who have different geniuses than us. and can support us in ways that we can't support ourselves, because everyone is so different. And a lot of people are trying to do everything on their own. But if we can come together with our different geniuses, with our different archetypal energies, it's like, I'm definitely in business. I have a very strong warrior, right? And that sometimes needs to be balanced by the people that I work with who maybe have softer energies, right, in certain situations. Yeah. Or, someone may be very intuitive and have a lot of vision, but they find it difficult to implement. So they start working with their own masculine energy to implement, and then they attract a physical person who's reflecting that energy. Whereas previously they're like, why don't I ever have anyone working for me that can help me with this, and that? So the other side of this is understanding that we live in a reflective universe. And as you grow these parts of you up and you start interacting with them with more authenticity, then you're going to attract people into your life that reflect that maturity. And I think the work for women is maturing their masculine, and really? Not getting, I think a lot of women have unhealthy masculine energy, but not healthy masculine energy. I understand what you
mean. And that's kind of what I was alluding to before. It's like, I'm all for women being in careers and in masculine, what is traditionally masculine roles. I'm all for it, but you can see that a lot of women kind of push the boundaries and take it too far, and it's unhealthy. And that's
they just don't know any better. We're not taught how to. Even men aren't. A lot of men don't know how to be healthy men. I feel like the masculine in women is more immature. At least you guys, you have a better idea how to hold space and chill. And sit back and observe, right? Yeah. Because it's a more accepted posture in men. What's not accepted in a lot of men is having a more extravagant posture or being more vulnerable or emotional.
Yes.
And with women...
That would be me.
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of the work I do with men is actually supporting them to feel that. Yeah. Because otherwise they're going to be projecting their feminine outside of themselves and needing a woman to be able to feel alive and then for excitement and for sex.
And they're going to show up needy and...
Yeah, or just avoidant. Yeah. Needy or avoidant. Everyone's either, most people are avoidant or needy. Yeah. Because we're missing something in ourselves. Yeah. Right? And so when that becomes obvious, we either avoid it or we want more of it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. All right. Well, whilst we're on this topic of, finding love within ourselves, and you work with single people as well, I'm guessing. That's probably a big part of what you do. Like people really feeling like they want to attract, love and life partner, but they know that there's work that they need to do for themselves, right? What are what's the commonality that you see amongst everybody or most people that you work with in that regard?
That they're so focused on the external. Yeah. That they...
It's hard not to get attached to the ideal of, I want to, because, we're also taught to, visualize and do all this, and then we kind of get attached to this idea of, this is what I want my perfect partner to be like. And it becomes an attachment, right? Yeah. But then that's an external thing.
So my number one advice is take all the focus off the external. Yeah. Bring it here and check it out. Check out what this inner union is. This is the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. The only person that you're guaranteed to spend the rest of your life with. So start dating, get engaged, eventually get married. I have an inner union marriage ceremony with myself at least twice a year where I renew my vows and feel into what would be your ultimate partnership. Can you be that for you? So, a lot of people who make these lists of what they want in a man or a woman.
They can't be it for themselves.
It's like, are you all that, So... reflective universe.
Yeah, and I mean, I look at that as also having integrity with yourself. It's like that's doing what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, and part of that is also opening to what you deserve, of course, and we want that in physical manifestation. And something that's helpful is to know whether you're more avoidant or more anxious attachment. Yep. And if you're more avoidant, lean into love when you want to lean out. Yep. If you're more of a love addict or anxious attachment style, lean out when you want to lean in.
I think what we're referring to here is the common attachment styles, right? So there's 3 or 4 of them, and then there's a secure one, right? So how do people find their way to being secure?
Well, it's feeling a safe foundation within yourself, a strong center within yourself, which then once you're in a relationship, you can have that strong center with that person.
Yep.
Okay, here we have a safe foundation from which I can go and have my independence, but then we can also come back and support each other and celebrate together and be there for one another through the challenges. So it's interdependence. Where we're not so independent, we're not dependent. And if as children we grew up in environments where we felt safe, we could also go off and explore, but we also felt safe and our needs were met, then we would all be securely attached.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just kind of reflecting on my journey, and my thing was definitely anxious. So, you know, if I was in a situation where I didn't feel like I was getting a response I needed or whatever, I would get anxious. And then as I started doing a lot of personal development a long time ago, I started having awareness of this, and it's like, okay, I can feel the trigger coming on, and I have very good awareness. And then it's just the quicker you can catch that, right? And then that's kind of been my journey, is like, okay, slowly I've figured out, oh, that's there. Oh, now I can see that. And then it just becomes so quick. It's like, okay, that's there. Okay, gone. Move on. It's not going to sit with me. So.
And are you now attracting women who can really be there for you?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, great. Yeah. And awareness is everything, you know. If we can catch something before it escalates, that's always the key.
Well, it's one thing to have the awareness of it. It's another thing to then be able to elegantly deal with it.
Yeah, well, we need to meditate on it, and we need that meditation, especially if you're a woman, to include an element of primal expression or you know, express and release. Because I know for me, when I became aware of the attachment styles, you know, I was definitely anxious attachment, and I knew all the principles, so I was acting avoidant because I'm like, oh well, you know, I don't want to be anxious, and then I would end up being the opposite, being avoidant, until I really started to allow the emotions to vibrate through my body and just check out what they needed. So I stopped being anxious, but suddenly I was able to ask for what I needed. And I think that's key. And
I think there's also a way to have that awareness without the judgment. So it's like catching it when it's there, it comes up, so I can catch it, but I don't have, there's not a charge. There's not a charge between it. I can, it's like being the observer and seeing it going, oh, that's there. All right, let me sit on that. Let me ponder on that. Let me meditate on that. Let me work through that and just.
But then the feminine side of that is we're only as needy as our unmet needs. So when we actually let ourselves feel what's underneath that and go beyond just witness, but then what's the energy and emotion underneath that? What's underneath that? What's underneath that? And there's a neglected child underneath that often. So when I actually started letting her feel, I'm like, wow, you know, what does that even need? And it's so important. And, you know, I still do this, and probably 70% of the time it's a need that I can give myself. But 30% of the time I need to set a boundary, or I need to say to someone, hey, I'm feeling disappointed. I need you to be on time when we organize to go out together. That would make me feel cherished. And it's okay to say that. But, you know, when we're avoidant or attachment, we're in fight or flight. When we're in secure attachment, we're able to set healthy boundaries and ask for what we need because we're actually vibrating our emotional body and listening to what's underneath it.
Exactly. And what you're describing there is articulating much better than what I was saying before of without the charge.
Release the charge.
Yeah, exactly.
And because some people, they don't have the charge anymore when they've meditated, but they still have the tension point. They still have the knot. So then they're just cleverly controlling their lives, which is what I was doing. So I know that one well. Yes. I mean, it's a long discussion. Yeah, it's getting a bit more complex.
Well, that's what I say. The work just keeps on going. It just keeps on going.
And because once we start actually vibrating the emotion and giving it sound and movement, Kundalini is awakening, number one, and number two, we start to enter the unconscious more deeply. And of course, you can go to unconscious places when you meditate, but bringing in that vibrational resonance through the body or the song, right? Yep. The song doesn't always have to be pretty. There's like this holy darkness that you go to where the mind is completely let go and the body has taken you into memories that you've been able to expel from the nervous system and then actually experience a recalibration where you're actually now open to getting what you need.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
So this is the work that you do with people. Obviously, you run regular events and retreats, and I'm guessing you're doing personal coaching and stuff like that. So what's the most powerful kind of thing that you do? Is it bringing the people together in a retreat?
It's really what people feel drawn to. Some people work better in retreat environments. Some people one-on-one. So I always say, like, trust yourself. If I don't know them, trust yourself what you feel called to. I think for strong trauma, sexual trauma, physical abuse, repeated soft trauma around relationships, private sessions is always going to be so supportive. But, a retreat environment where you're interacting with people and actually receiving touch. Like, we need touch. We need love. We need authentic communication. So when you're experiencing that as a community, it's amazing.
I sort of think there's something to be said for a group of people coming together with their own vulnerabilities.
Definitely.
Something really to be said for that. Yeah.
So it's all amazing, and it's really just about where people feel more called to.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So I've got one final question for you, but before I do that, just want to say thanks very much for coming in, and
thanks for having me.
Thanks for the awesome work that you're doing. It's really, really interesting and powerful, and I actually think it's very, very important for the direction of humanity. I think, as humans, we've got to only move in that direction, which is we've got to connect back to nature, and we've got to connect back to what is nature for us, which is all the things that we're talking about here, and connecting back into that most powerful source energy. And
as you say that, it just gives me another definition of Tantra. Well, literally, the definitions are to weave, and you brought up weaving at the beginning of this, and also Tan and Tra is instrument of expansion. So Tra is instrument, Tan is expansion. But then another definition is, as you say, essential nature is anything that's not your essential nature.
Yeah.
The practices of Tantra are giving them an opportunity to be released, right? So when we make love, orgasmic energy is this healing modality that pushes out whatever isn't love. When we express and release and we move and we start to touch and communicate more authentically and have beautiful bodywork and tantric massage, again, anything that's not love is being released.
Wow.
And then we're calling in what is love, and we're experiencing that through actually being together and feeling what it's like to have deep presence with someone and deep intimacy.
Yeah, very powerful. And one of the common themes that comes up in just about every conversation in some manner or form is presence, through any manner of conversations. It always comes back to that. And look, I'm just a business guy, so for me to be talking about presence every session, every one of these podcasts, it's pretty important stuff. So thank you very much for the work that you do. And one final question. If you had the one-time superpower of being able to connect one message with all of humanity, what would that one message be?
Feel more, think less.
It sounds.
It's all here.
It sounds
it's all here.
Simple.
The wisdom of the body, the heart. You know.
I mean, that sounds simple, but that's profound because there's unlimited depth to that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and the offset to that is have a practice that supports you to grow in your capacity to be with sensation, to be with feeling, to be with experience.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So how do people find you? What's the best way? Instagram, website?
Yeah, Instagram and Facebook, Embodied Awakening.
I'll make sure everyone's got the links. Click on the links.
And we've got lots of free blogs, podcasts, amazing resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, as well as events and sessions. So check it out, see what you're drawn
Awesome.
to.
And you run events here in Bali and in Australia as well.
Well, Australia I can't even get to at the moment.
Yeah.
Bali for now, usually internationally. Yeah.
Cool. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and see you next time back down the rabbit hole. Make sure you go check out Chantelle Raven and all the amazing work that she's doing. Guys, see you soon.